We live in the golden age of comic adaptations. Every month there's new series, new films, new announcements for both, and that should make me thrilled. As a lifelong comic fan, I'm exactly the person who should be eating this up, especially from Disney+, with fan favorite characters like Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel getting adaptations. She-Hulk. I should be ultra pumped, right? But ever since Endgame, and even before that, I think, something had kind of shifted for me. And I think that I put my finger on exactly what. Let's talk about why I'd be just as happy if superhero franchises just ended. I'm Dan Umthen, and this is the Doomcast. First off, if you can do me a favor, please hit subscribe and the bell. I make a video about once a week, and I hate asking, but they are all great, and I'd hate for you to miss one. Now, don't get me wrong, I like watching comic book movies, okay? Since the days of the Batman serial adaptations and the Fleischer Superman cartoons, comic adaptations on big screen and small have grown hand in hand with the comic industry, and they were always geared to both adults and children. So it's not new, and really, at 15 years old, neither is the MCU. Like, if you're my age, you lived through a ton of bad comic adaptations, for sure. The 94 Corman Fantastic Four, even though the costumes were spot on, the old Captain America, the Dolph Lundgren Punisher. Animation rarely missed, though, and it generally got the spirit of the comics right. But the whole... Then came Blade and the Fox X-Men films, and the whole game changed at that point, capturing the general spirit of comics while retaining mainstream appeal. And when the MCU figured out with Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy that they could incorporate more of Marvel Comics' fantastic and often silly elements into film while leaning into that silliness, it made for what felt to me like a kind of special, fun series of adaptations I truly appreciated at the time. It felt like something that I had never seen before. But I feel like the MCU is now becoming a victim of its own success and ubiquity. Over the last couple of years, the multiple Disney Plus series, the relatively lukewarm flavor of the last 2 out of 3 feature films over the last year have left me feeling, don't get me wrong, I did like them as films, but just the same. It feels like all of this has become a little formulaic and generic. Stuff that I have seen before, like content that fans have been trained to consume. And boy, if you've watched this channel enough, you already know I hate content. I hate the word content. I hate what it implies. Another gray goo word to refer to everything that means absolutely nothing whatsoever. I am not a content creator, but I'm a guy that makes videos about comics. Now, while I liked most of this other Disney stuff, for the most part, it really feels a bit less bright and clever than it did as a whole. Maybe because if you're looking closely and you're seeing so much of it so often, you start to recognize the choices of camera work, the color temps, the shot positions, lighting, and it feels very uniform. And maybe all of the plot-driven 3-act hero journey stuff is becoming old, and now even attempts to deviate from that tried and true patent formula starts to fall apart, even as they branch into broader characters that they haven't touched, storylines that are a little bit more recent. And they've always managed to keep things a little bit fresh by, even when adapting storylines like Civil War, it's not quite Civil War. In terms of formula, I think WandaVision is another good example. It's somewhat courageous in its attempt, and I didn't dislike it because of a lack of fighting or explosions, but because it felt like a show that a dumb person thought a smart person would make. Legion, even New Mutants, managed to do conceptual psychological horror in that respect much better, and WandaVision still devolved into shaky camera, third action, energy blast fight for the most part. And don't get me wrong, I do appreciate that WandaVision was an attempt to deviate from that formula. It was my own frustration, however, with that selfsame show, for all of its immense strengths, that I started feeling very much this way. Because even any slight criticism of this behemoth of a product is now fiercely defended by fans who have been trained to dichotomize their thinking about it, like a team sport, and not like art. Like brand loyalty to a beverage or a chain restaurant. You just didn't get it, Dan, even some good friends said to me. Homie, I got it. It just didn't hit like that for me. And And that's okay. Comic adaptations have always had a history of US propaganda as well. From George Reeves' Truth, Justice, and The American Way getting added, to Captain America, to the Comics Code, to the Batman TV show, to the entire MCU for the most part. Now it feels, though, like every single villain has a very believable, very reasonable motive, and makes great points for the most part, that the viewer simply ends up getting reinforced that a principled attempt at changing the status quo is tantamount to villainy. And passive heroes, that is people who are reactionary to defend that status quo, are in the moral right to defend that sort of bland imaginary golden meme. Arthur Harrow and Moon Knight, Wanda, Thanos, Killmonger, Loki, even the Batman in many ways has a Riddler that reinforces the same thing. Even though the Batman is the antithesis of most Marvel films, it's still held to that troubling trope. The point of cinema is to entertain and make things fun, and also to transport you to a place you've never been before. And frequently Marvel movies succeed at the first, and more recently start to fail at the second. Now, I'm not asking for William Shakespeare or even Stanley Kubrick. I'm asking for films that take me someplace where I haven't been before. Something that I don't feel like I expect. Something that doesn't feel like so much gray goo all pressed together. I don't want a product. I want a film. But I still want to have fun. Now, the total commodification of entertainment isn't new. And neither is the commodification of comics, of course. Obviously, the 90s and million-copy print runs of X-Force taught us all that. But seeing this behemoth, which is fandom, 2 movie studios own all of the fandoms, and A24 and a few others are putting out actual film, which Trevor Noah terrifyingly called the salad of movies, shows just how much we've deviated into a culture that worships a lack of culture. Like Burroughs said, the money machine eats quality and shits quantity. And in the immortal words of Jack Kirby, comics will break your heart, kid. And it seems that comic film will as well. But at least I've got my graphic novels and floppies, which still, regardless, is always going to be my preferred format for the ninth art. Thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate you. Take care. Have a great week.